Thank you for joining us here at IFPRI to celebrate a very productive partnership and a collaboration between the World Food Program and the International Food Policy Research Institute. And we will also sign a very exciting new framework based on our past work. So let me first introduce Josette Chiron to you. So she is the Executive Director of the World Food Program, the largest humanitarian agency in the world. So she is a partner of IFPRI, and I will introduce her a little bit later. And ladies and gentlemen, the hunger and undernutrition continue to affect lives of millions of people in the world. Their suffering remains one of the humanity's greatest challenge and tragedies. The IFPRI 2011 Global Hunger Index clearly shows that even right now, the 26 countries are still having very extreme alarming level or extreme alarming level or alarming levels of hunger. The World Food Program hunger map tells us that the cost of hunger is very high. Could be about $450 billion a year. Could you imagine $450 billion a year is lost because of hunger? And the recurring food price spikes and volatility continue to undermine poor people's access to food. So more than 100 million people went to poverty and hunger in 2007, 2008. And we are facing great challenges in the future. The lack of water, lack of land, the climate is changing, the population continues to grow. We know that the economy in developing and emerging economies will continue to grow very strong. But that does not mean that the poverty hunger will disappear automatically. So what we need is a very comprehensive approach to tackle this great tragedy of the human being. So under Josette's leadership, WFP has transformed its role in global fighting against hunger and poverty. Now, particularly WFP's innovative approaches, such as Purchase for Progress, have helped millions of poor people to access to food in short run. But in the meantime, also help them, assist them in improving their access to assets, to markets. And two distinguished features of Josette's leadership skills, among many others, are critical to this success, the success of WFP in the last 4 or 5 years. The one is she's approach based on research support, based on evidence, so based on experiments. And we really don't know whether certain approach will work or will fail. And WFP is willing to learn. So another skill Josette has is to bring the private sector into WFP's network. And I have observed that for the last 4 or 5 years. So I'm quite jealous of you by bringing the largest agribusiness firms into WFP network. Now, IFPRI has been very fortunate to have numerous opportunities to partner with WFP. So IFPRI provided technical inputs to WFP's Purchase for Progress program. And together we supported Ethiopia Commodity Exchange. I remember you traveled to Ethiopia together with Ineni. Your strong support, not only financial support, your moral support to help the smallholders to access to markets. And we partnered in evaluating the impact of food for education. And Akhtar Ahmad is here. He has done very interesting work in Bangladesh. And cash-based transfers compared to food-based transfers. And we jointly supported farmers in producing, processing, marketing biofortified crops such as sweet potatoes, cassava, and millet. So Howdy Boys, you have met. So he's the director of that program. And IFPRI's broad research agenda, the broad research agenda includes several areas of strategic importance to WFP. So our collaboration has been vibrant and productive over the last 4 years under your leadership. And we look forward to a strengthened and enhanced partnership in the future. This new partnership will include several components. Number one, conducting the evidence-based assessments of the impact and the cost effectiveness of different food assistance strategies. So food assistance, not just food aid. So this is another transformation Josette brought into WFP, so from food aid to food assistance. The second is to create international public goods. So the results, strategies, and lessons used by WFP can be used by many others, the global institutions, national institutions, to scale up their own actions. And IFPRI has been working with WFP in terms of synthesize the lessons, the results, and the strategy, and the failures. Sometimes, we have to be open to ourselves. Not, sometimes we do fail. And at number three, increasing the relevance and impact of IFPRI's research, while strengthening WFP's capacity for applied research and evaluation. So we learned a great deal through this partnership. And we truly appreciated the hard work of Lynn Brown, who used to work actually at IFPRI, and Manuel Aranda De Silva from WFP, and Dan Galligan was Dan, and Turnus Van Riener from IFPRI. So they took the lead in drafting the agreement on behalf of the two institutions, and will spearhead the implementation. So this is not really a new start, but an enhanced continuation of what is already a beautiful partnership between two organizations. So in just a few months, Josette will conclude her term at WFP, and will assume her new role as a chairwoman of the World Economic Forum. So Josette has been WFP's executive director for 5 years now, since April 2007, I remember. And she has managed more than 10,000 employees. So I'm managing 500. I know how difficult it is. And overseeing food assistance for more than 100 million people in 75 countries. And Josette, as you wrap up your successful tenure at IFPRI, I want to say congratulations. And your leadership, your dedication, your passion have inspired many people here in this room. And so we at IFPRI wish you the best in your new role and look forward to working with you at WEF, which IFPRI is also an active member. Thank you, Josette.
Thank you.
Great.
Have my red cup. Well, Shengen, I want to thank you.
Sure.
And also the entire IFPRI leadership team that's here. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but what a fabulous partnership this has been. When I came to WFP, I really was focused on 3 particular goals and ideas that had been with me for a long time and I've been working on in different aspects. One of them, and all 3 of these, IFPRI has been a vital partner, and with this agreement will become an even more vital partner. The first is the total dilemma we have in the world that over half of the people who face starvation every year in Hungary are farmers. This has been something I have been trying to figure out for a long time. Why is it that small farmers in the world cannot even be able to support themselves and their own families? And this is simply unacceptable. This is a problem. And answering that question, understanding it, was key because the hunger numbers are too big. WFP is charged with the normative responsibility to save lives and livelihoods, when people are cut off from adequate food. And when I came to office, 860 million people in the world couldn't even figure out how to fill this cup every day. And so I was really struck by the thought that something's broken at the core, and these numbers aren't going to go down unless we do that. The second thing is, how do we ensure that the World Food Program, as a public institution, garners the confidence and the trust of the people of the world who so generously fund us, that we are doing our business not only most effectively and efficiently, but in a way that as we give a hand out, it also gives a hand up. Because people want to feel that the mission and role we're playing is not building dependency, but liberating people from that dependency. So how do we do our actions? Is it possible to imagine that we could do our life-saving actions in a way that helps people solve their own problem of hunger? And build that trust through learning, through being willing to say, this isn't working. We have people dependent on food aid for decades. Something isn't right here. And being willing to take a self-critical look, and being willing to say, what are the alternatives? How can we do business differently? And that was very key. And then the third thing, right after I took office, the food crisis hit. And this amazing phenomenon, which at the time I called a silent tsunami because it hit the world, but all of the vulnerability went to this red cup. And what you saw is that the most vulnerable lost half their food. And WFP lived this because we lost half our food. So for WFP's contributions in 2008, we could afford half as much food. And what we were experiencing, the poor and the hungry throughout the world were experiencing without any resiliency, and whole nations were experiencing it. And so how do we get the risk out of the cup? How do we back it out so we have a food system that has some resiliency? Because, frankly, the problem is not manageable in a case-by-case basis. You have to look at the systems, you have to look at the dilemma of the small farmer, and you have to look at building institutions of public trust that can help when all else fails, but do their work in a way that can get those numbers down. IFPRI has been our critical partner in all three of these pillars. IFPRI is a fabulous institution. You have many of your experts here, but what I really love about IFPRI is it's a can-do, applied learning institution. This is kind of like a match made in heaven, because WFP, we're not about theory, we're about practical application. And so for WFP, we do every year, if you broke our interventions into individual meals, a cup of food for a kid or somebody, we do over 30 billion interventions. That's a big footprint. How do we do it? How do we get better at it? How do we learn from it? Today, as Schengen has pointed out, we've transformed in a number of key ways. But they boil down to two things. One is WFP asks, are we using the right tool at the right time, at the right place, to make our interventions as empowering and as supportive of fragile local markets as possible? And so things like Purchasing for Progress, where farmers become part of the supply chain of hope rather than a problem to be addressed. And in Gulu, Uganda today, there's thousands of farmers who were dependent on food aid for decades, who today are feeding kids in the Kivus, who are the victims of conflict there, and they're so proud, and it can work. But we don't have all the answers. And IFPRI is a key partner in helping us get better at that. So right tool at the right time at the right place. The other tool is sometimes it's better not to bring the food in or buy it even locally, but it's better to, the Red Cup now has a friend, it's a swipe card, to give people what I call digital food, the ability to go to a small local market and swipe this and let that local market sell them food, and all of a sudden, you know, when you bring food to a kid, you've got a big win there, you save their life. But all of a sudden you've got many winners. The shopkeeper's winning, the local farmer's winning, the kid's winning, the family's winning, they're not selling things off to feed their kids, and you have a very different kind of controls that you can do here. But today WFP is doing digital food in 37 countries. And IFPRI is doing a very key evaluation of this work in 5 countries, where we'll say, does it work better? How does it work better? And, as Shengen pointed out, what are we doing wrong? And we need to create the kind of environment in the world where that is the question. Not, oh, you failed, or you... It's, how do we learn from these and get better at this? And so we're working across this. So right tool, right time, right place, which helps us also help governments with their own learning. Our goal is to have every government in the world the resiliency to deal with food shocks with their own tools, to create their own WFP for their own countries, and it's important that we pass on those learnings. The second thing is the right food at the right time at the right place. And Shengen, you took the leadership here at a time of great volatility and vulnerability in the world food markets, and you immediately started connecting the dots between nutrition and food and agriculture and the potential for these to come together with solutions. And frankly, we know today that it's not just about kilocalories, that if kids aren't getting the right food when they're very young, their brains and bodies will not form. And so today we have hundreds of millions of kids with brains and bodies that are stunted, and this is inexcusable. It's not necessary. We know enough about micronutrients and the access to it, and IFPRI's been a key partner in looking at the whole value chain of affordable, nutritious food with us and helping WFP get better, but also helping us be able to pass that on to governments. I think this is really key. When you have almost 1 billion people on Earth, that's 1 out of every 7 who do not know how to ensure they have adequate, nutritious food, those of us who are privileged enough to work on this really have to say, all hands to the wheel. We're all going to work together, and we're all going to be willing to discard what doesn't work and to amp up what works and to share that with governments to overcome this. Shengen's right. Our cost of hunger study and IFPRI studies have shown that it costs about average 6% of GDP for a developing nation if the cost of malnutrition. And so we know that in the most malnutrition burdened nations on Earth, that's about 230 billion lost just in the least developed, most burdened nations. And the World Bank estimates that 10 billion would address that. So we have to get ahead of this investment curve, but mostly we have to be able to make the case that we know what kind of solutions can work. I also just want to point out our work in the G20. I think Maximo's here, and Chris Moore and Chaz and our team. Thank you, because we've taken studies, we've taken ideas, we've taken research, we've taken action, and we've put it together to say, how do we build resiliency systems for those nations that don't have the resiliency? And we put that question to the world, and we have some pathways that have been created to explore and that are very, very critical. And I think this is important because in the 2008 food crisis, we saw the world divide into 2 halves, those nations and people with resiliency and those without resiliency. And so to me, we know that in an era of volatility, we have to build in the nutrition and food resiliency. And IFPRI really took this challenge on and has become really a key partner in looking at issues such as safety nets emergency food reserves, best practices, social protection, and how we get ahead of the changes in climate and do that. So I want to thank you, Schengen. I want to thank your team that has worked very hard on this with my team, but Tennis, and Dan, and Rajul, and we also have our team. Lynn is not here, but I know you worked very closely with Manuel and Chris and his team, and Nancy and her team. I want to thank you. The last thing I just want to say on the private sector. We're in an era where it's not enough to say public institutions, governments, let's solve this. And we know that if we look at Brazil's defeating hunger faster than any nation on earth. They got the social policies, very innovative and great, but the private sector has driven their advance to be one of the great ag powerhouses. And it's the tripartite, I think, cooperation that's key in this era, is being able to unlock that potential of the private sector. So Nancy and her team have really pioneered that with me at the World Food Program to really take the knowledge and apply it into our work. And I just want to thank Tanuja, who joined me the first at WFP, the only one I brought from the US, but she was a science fellow at State Department and came to me after my first month there and said, Lancet is working on information that will show a child will never recover. And I wrote the cover piece for that Lancet article that really changed the way many of us do business on the first 1,000 days of life. Alan and all our team, I thank you. But thank you for this partnership. This cooperation framework will ensure that we get it right, get it better, and help put WFP out of business, which has to be all of our goal, that people can feed themselves and their families and the world. Thank you.
Now I see Josette's passion. So whether the cup is half empty or half full. And Josette is also a great, great negotiator. When we were in Paris, one evening she said, hey, Schengen, we got to talk to the Minister of Agriculture from China. Remember? And the Minister of Agriculture said, well, let me consult with my government. Because Josette wanted to have a special window for food aid, to not be restricted by the food ban. The Minister of Agriculture went back to consult with the probably Minister of Foreign Affairs. The minister didn't tell us anything. But second day, the China changed its position. So that agreement was there. So that window was there. So it's wonderful. Yeah. So you're a great negotiator. Yeah. In the meantime, Josette also was involved in the UN reform, right? I think you're chairman or? I know it's very much needed.
50 major reforms later. We've got some momentum, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Josette. So good. Now with your witness, we're going to sign this new agreement.
Excellent.
Yeah? All right.
Excellent. Oh.
You wanted to sit over here?
Yes, I guess so.
Yeah?
Yes.
Yes.